The Rhône is one of the major rivers of Europe, rising in Switzerland, passing through Lake Geneva and running through southeastern France. At Arles, near its mouth on the Mediterranean Sea, the river divides into two branches, known as the Great Rhône and the Little Rhône. The resulting delta constitutes the Camargue region. Name. The name Rhône continues the name Rhodanus in Greco-Roman geography. The Gaulish name of the river was *Rhodanos or *Rotonos. The Greco-Roman as well as the reconstructed Gaulish name is masculine, as is French La Rhône. This form survives in the Italian namesake, Rodano. German has adopted the French name but given it the feminine gender, di Rhône. The original German adoption of the Latin name was also masculine, der Rotten. It survives only in the upper valley. In French, the adjective derived from the river is Rhodanienne, as in Le Sillon Rhodanienne, which is the name of the long, straight Saône and Rhône river valleys, a deep cleft running due south to the Mediterranean and separating the Alps from the Massif's central. Navigation. Before railroads and highways were developed, the Rhône was an important inland trade and transportation route, connecting the cities of Arles, Avignon, Valence, Vienne and Lyon to the Mediterranean ports of Fos, Marseille and Sète. Traveling down the Rhône by barge would take 3 weeks. By motorized vessel, the trip now takes only 3 days. The Rhône is classified as a Class 5 waterway from the mouth of the Saône to the sea. The Saône, which is also canalized, connects the Rhône ports to the cities of Alfroche-sur-Saône, Macon and Chalon-sur-Saône. Smaller vessels can travel further northwest, north and northeast via the Centre-Loire-Brière and Loing canals to the Seine, via the Canal de la Manne à la Saône to the Marne, via the Canal des Vosges to the Moselle and via the Canal du Rhône au Rhin to the Rhine. The Rhône is infamous for its strong current where the river carries large quantities of water. Current speeds up to 10 km per hour are sometimes reached, particularly in the stretch below the last lock at Vallabrugues and in some of the diversion canals. The 10 river locks are operated daily from 5 a.m. until 9 p.m. Night operation can be requested and is usually granted. Course. The Rhône rises as an effluent of the Rhône Glacier in Valais, in the Swiss Alps, at an altitude of approximately 2,208 meters. From there it flows south through Glaich to the Goms. Shortly before reaching Brig, it receives the waters of the Massa from the Alh Glacier. It flows onward through the valley which bears its name and runs initially in a westerly direction about 30 kilometers to Luc, then southwest about 50 kilometers to Martigny. Down as far as Brig, the Rhône is a torrent. It then becomes a great mountain river running southwest through a glacier valley. Between Brig and Martigny, it collects waters mostly from the valleys of the Pennine Alps to the south, whose rivers originate from the large glaciers of the massifs of Monte Rosa, Dôme, and Grand Combin. At Martigny, where it receives the waters of the Drans on its left bank, the Rhône makes a strong turn towards the north. Going back to Lake Geneva, the valley narrows, a feature that has long given the Rhône Valley strategic importance for the control of the Alpine passes. The Rhône then marks the boundary between the cantons of Valais and Vaud, separating the Valais Chablais and Chablais Vaudois. It enters Lake Geneva near La Bouverette. On a portion of its extent, Lake Geneva marks the border between France and Switzerland. On the left bank of Lake Geneva the river receives the Morges River. This river marks the border between France and Switzerland. The Morges enters Lake Geneva at St. Gingolph, a village on both sides of the border. On the right bank of the lake the Rhône receives the Venage and the Morges River. Lake Geneva ends in Geneva, where the lake level is maintained by the Sujet Dam. The average discharge from Lake Geneva is 251 cubic meters per second. In Geneva, the Rhône receives the waters of the Arve from the Mont Blanc. After a course of 290 kilometers, the Rhône leaves Switzerland and enters the southern Jura Mountains. It then turns toward the south past the Bourget Lake, which it is connected by the Savieres Channel. At Lyon, which is the biggest city along its course, the Rhône meets its biggest tributary, the Saône. The Saône carries 400 cubic meters per second and the Rhône itself 600 cubic meters per second. From the confluence, the Rhône follows the southbound direction of the Saône. Along the Rhône Valley, it is joined on the right bank by the rivers Erieu, Ardèche, Ceze, and Garden coming from the Cevennes Mountains, and on the left bank by the rivers Isère, with an average discharge of 350 cubic meters per second. Drôme, Uvezza, endurance at 188 cubic meters per second from the Alps. From Lyon, it flows south between the Alps and the Massif Central. At Arles, the Rhône divides into two major arms forming the Camargue Delta, both branches flowing into the Mediterranean Sea, the delta being termed the Rhône Fan. The larger arm is called the Grand Rhône, the smaller the Petit Rhône. The average annual discharge at Arles is 1,710 cubic meters per second. History. The Rhône has been an important highway since the times of the Greeks and Romans. It was the main trade route from the Mediterranean to east-central Gaul. As such, it helped convey Greek cultural influences to the Western Hallstatt and the later Latine cultures. Celtic tribes living near the Rhône included the Seduni, Sequana, Sego-Bridges, Allobroges, Seguziavi, Helvetii, Vocantii and Volcaire-Commerci. Navigation was difficult, as the river suffered from fierce currents, chalieus, floods in spring and early summer when the ice was melting, and droughts in late summer. Until the 19th century, passengers traveled in coches d'eau drawn by men or horses, or under sail. Most traveled with a painted cross covered with religious symbols as protection against the hazards of the journey. Trade on the upper river used barques du Rhône, sailing barges, 30 by 3.5 meters, with a 75-ton capacity. As many as 50 to 80 horses were employed to haul trains of 5 to 7 craft upstream. Goods would be transshipped at Arles into 23-meter sailing barges called alleges d'Arles for the final run down to the Mediterranean. The first experimental steamboat was built at Lyon by Geoffroy de Bance in 1783. Regular services were not started until 1829 and they continued until 1952. Steam passenger vessels 80 to 100 meters long made up to 20 kilometers per hour and could do the downstream run from Lyon to Arles in a day. Cargo was hauled in bateaux anguillis, boats 157 by 6.35 meters with paddle wheels amidships, and bateaux crabbies, a huge toothed claw wheel 6.5 meters across to grip the river bed in the shallows to supplement the paddle wheels. In the 20th century, powerful motor barges propelled by diesel engines were introduced carrying 1,500 tons. In 1933, the Compagnie Nationale du Rhône was established to tame the river. Some progress was made in deepening the navigation channel and constructing scouring walls, but World War II brought such work to a halt. In 1942, following the collapse of Vichy France, Italian military forces occupied southeastern France up to the eastern banks of the Rhône, as part of the Italian fascist regime's expansionist agenda. In 1948, the government started construction on a series of locked barrages and canal cuts, to improve navigation and generate electricity, with locks raising boats up to 23 meters. Along the Rhône, cities and towns along the Rhône include Switzerland, Oberwald, Brig, Visp, Luc, Sierra, Sion, Martigny, Saint Maurice. See Lake Geneva for a list of Swiss and French towns around the lake. Geneva, France. Lyon, Vienne, Tournon-sur-Rhône opposite Tain-l'Hermitage, Valence opposite Saint-Péray and Glarand Granges, Montélimar opposite La Tille and Roche-Maury, Viviers, Bourg Saint-Andéol, Pont Saint-Esprit, Roquemaure opposite Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Avignon opposite Villeneuve-les-Avignon, Beaucaire opposite Tarascon, Vallebrugues, Arles,